The United Kingdom has for centuries been hailed as one of the great economic powerhouses of the world. Citizens of other countries have looked upon her prosperity with envy. Many have moved here in search of work and a better life. They come believing that the United Kingdom will always offer a better standard of living and better prospects than other parts of the world. But since 2008 and the collapse of the British banking sector, the country has suffered a reversal in its economic fortunes. By 2013, the country's overall financial position had contracted, and there was yet to be a sign of a long and lasting recovery. This raises some challenging issues, such as how this economic instability has affected the wages of the country and the extent to which the public feel the government is making the right decisions. The British Prime Minister, David Cameron, has also suggested that we're all in it together. Do the public agree? These are the simple questions we sought to answer. We began by taking a reality check on Britain's performance in terms of paying its workforce. We asked the public to guess where, out of 27 European countries, the United Kingdom ranks in terms of wage rises. Out of 27 European countries, where would you guess the United Kingdom's average wage rate is?
I would imagine we would be in the top 5 or 6. I would imagine that countries like Germany would probably be ahead of us, but I'd like to think hopefully we're in the top 5 or 6. 10?
I think it would probably be somewhere around 15.
I think it's lower end. I don't think it's higher end because everything around's going up. And the money seems to be just keeping it the level we was like probably 10 years ago, 5-10 years ago.
27 countries in the European Union. Where do you think the UK ranks in terms of wage increases between 1 and 27?
At the moment, I do think they should be somewhere in the top 10.
I'd say we're probably halfway.
Probably about midway down the table, I'd imagine.
So, that's what the public said. What do the facts tell us?
The British wages have done extremely poorly in recent years. In fact, the only countries that are worse than us are Bulgaria, Portugal and Greece. So, in fact, we've had real wage cuts of around 5.5% in the UK over the 2009 to 2013 period. So we've done pretty poorly.
As far as the situation of the economy in general is concerned, it's very evident that the wages in UK have fallen immensely behind what is happening in European Union. The latest figures very clearly show that Britain is far behind. In fact, the wages have increased a lot better, or the fall in the income has been more significant than even in Cyprus and Spain, which are going through extreme austerity measures.
These are perhaps surprising statistics. After inflation is taken into account, Britain's wage rises are amongst the worst in Europe. According to parliamentary figures, workers' salaries have dropped by 5.5% in just the last 3 years. That puts the United Kingdom at 24th out of 27 countries, the 4th worst performance in the European Union. This seems to confirm that workers are worse off under the Conservative-led government, as the cost of living rises faster than wages. We asked for the public's response to this ranking and for their assessment of how confident the country ought to be about its future prospects. How do you feel about the British economy?
Well, I think it's a problem for sure. I mean, we have every day more millionaires and every year more millionaires because of financial system and in general. So they give millions and millions and bonuses for the finance. So today, if you want to be a millionaire, you have to go in finance. So either this choice, either doing something you like and taking a risk of being underpaid or not well paid. But definitely, when you combine it with the social security system, the NHS system, that's quite a good value already. But I think it's a problem in Europe in general is a big crisis, and I think the UK should stay in the European Union, definitely, to stay active concerning employment and everything.
It's quite bleak, quite unsettlingly bleak. Terrible, because it just seems like everything's harder. And not only is it harder, it just feels like everyone's trying to get something from somewhere, and you're just putting more in and just don't seem like you're getting a lot back out of it. You know, it's just an hard graft, totally hard graft.
How do you feel about the British economy?
It's just terrible. It's just, we're not thought of, are we, to be fair, in a way with our wages and things. I just don't think that we're thought of as much as the government should do, really, because we put them in to look after us, but I don't really feel that they do that reflected in our wages. Not really.
I think, well, the labour workforce is definitely undervalued, and therefore there is definitely a big push to bring in foreign workers, I guess, cheap labour.
It's tough to say. I know that even though wages do rise slightly, they're not rising above other things. So, for example, travel's going up by 9%, I think, but real wages, I think, have only increased by about 3%. So it's hard to say what impact that's had on the economy.
Again, our experts offered their perspective on the state of Britain's economy and the chances of a stronger recovery.
The British GDP is doing relatively well compared to what it was a couple of years ago, but in fact for this year, forecast for economic growth is only 0.7%, and that's not very good. I mean, we're used to 2 to 3% in better times, and the prospects are not very good because the government's got a huge debt pile, huge fiscal deficit to address, and let's remember we've had very, very low interest rates. So that's all been sort of helping the economy. So once you take away the low interest rates and the big fiscal deficits, then there could be worse times ahead, in fact.
There's a lot of debate currently how speedily the economy is recovering. In the last quarter, we were told that the economy recovered the GDP by 0.6%, and a big fuss was made about that particular recovery. But if you look at it in sort of a perspective, the reality that 0.6% GDP growth was actually over the last, if you take the average of over the last 2 years, the economy has shrunk by 3.5% in relation to many of the other European countries and generally. So the recovery that the economists and the analysts keep on talking about is quite farcical. It's not a recovery in real sense.
Some people feel the British government has spent too much money on making war and not enough on protecting wages. How widespread is this belief amongst the general public?
The government spent a lot of money on war and stuff. Which is more important to you, that the government spends money on wars or wages?
Wages. Or they're going indoors they don't need to be in. You can stay at home and pay wages, because I haven't got my wages today.
Obviously we need to defend countries, but the whole idea of spending more money on arms than education is absolutely daft. It's, what are we going to end up with in 20 years or 30 years?
Well, personally, I'm completely against war. So to me, a peaceful solution is always the way, and I am against investing money in anything where it's going to kill other people.
Do you think we should be fighting these wars, or do you think we should be fixing our economy?
Yeah, I think we should be fixing the economy. I don't know why we get involved in so many wars. I don't understand that. There never seems any real reason why we get involved.
Well, yeah, I reckon at the end of the day, I don't see why we're fighting the war, for one. For the other, I just think if you're going to spend money on that, really you've got to look at home first, make sure everyone else is sort of, otherwise we'll probably end up having a war here. And it might be a different way of looking at it, but that's the way it's going to be, like a dog-eat-dog world effect. So
I think, you know, we got our fingers in a lot of pies that don't belong to us, and also there's a lot of things we're doing wrong over here. You know, the benefit system and the way that works and the way it favours people. I mean, it pays not to work now. It's harder to get a poor-paying job and survive than it is to actually not work at all, which is wrong, you know.
I think they've spent too much on the war. They're trying to pull the troops out of Afghanistan and places like that. You obviously do need to patrol places like that, but I also do think the places where they've sent troops is a political game. There's strife in other countries, but I don't see the US and the UK sending troops there, which I think everyone knows why. Yeah, that's my take on it. They can spend money on better things.
So, while opinions vary, there is no doubt that the majority shared concerns about the investment in war as a time of financial austerity. But is this opinion backed up by the facts?
There are wars across the globe, you know, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, but the British taxpayer has only got a limited capacity to pay for all our contributions. So obviously we're better off not financing these foreign expeditions. You know, the idea that Britain's got a huge empire, you know, and that we can afford to act like that anymore is rather stupid in today's modern world.
We as a nation, as Britain and most of the Western countries, have spent a huge amount of money in the wars that we've been fighting, whether it is in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, or currently supporting the vicious characters who are fighting in Syria. So the war, the military has been sucking away the money from the economy which should have been spent on the National Health Service, on education, on roads. So the war machine has actually depleted a lot of our resources in UK, which would have gone to the proper recovery of the economy. But we continuously are fighting wars and saying that, you know, war on terror is to be fought in other places.
The United Kingdom government has a stated policy of reducing real terms incomes in the public sector, so people who work for the government will be less well off as time goes by. How do the general public feel about this apparently remarkable policy?
How do you feel generally about the government spending priorities in the light of our very serious double-dip recession?
They're not brilliant. I can support some of the cuts that they've made in some areas, but I think generally they seem a little bit clueless. I don't know what the answer is. I don't think anyone knows what the answer is really, but I don't think they're getting it right.
Well, I'm always in ideological terms, I'm always in support of more spending on things like public health and the National Health Service. I don't think you can refute that as being a priority which the government should have and which I perceive it doesn't currently have.
I didn't vote for this government, but it does seem to be making some progress as compared with other governments in Europe. When I look, my family's Spanish, and I see what's happening there, they seem to be in a worse state than us.
How do you feel about the way the government's making decisions about the economy?
I think it's disgusting. I think what they do for hospitals and doctors and things like that, I feel that's very, very poor, you know, because you have all these horrible stories at the hospitals and stuff, all because of cutbacks. Perhaps if they cut back on their own wages and their own lifestyle, that might help hospitals and doctors and schools and things as well, because they make cutbacks on all the important things, in my opinion. But they don't seem to make a lot of cutbacks on what they do.
You can see anyway that its economic priorities not only about the wages, but it doesn't invest enough in young people, it doesn't invest enough in public stuff, you know, a lot of things that it could invest in, it doesn't, and it's not that good, yeah.
To me, it seems like the more you got, the better you are. And I'm not taking it from people, because if you've earned it, good luck to you. But the less you got, it just seems to be harder and harder. But I don't think they've done enough for the lower side again, obviously.
So, as we have learned, there is a lot of dissatisfaction with the government's policy to reduce wages in a very real sense. Are the public right to be concerned about this? Once again, we asked our experts.
For a number of years, Britain has lived beyond its means. I mean, we can see that because we run what we call current account deficits. That means we import more than we export. So to some extent, the reality is that we need to spend less and earn more as a country as a whole. And therefore, that does actually involve people's living standards falling. You can't live on borrowed money forever.
There is no doubt that the public needs to be very concerned as to where this coalition government is leading us. They've got another 2 years perhaps left to make the rich people even richer and the poor people even poorer. And the strategy of the government has been really to give their friends in the financial services sector, in business and so on, more and more opportunities so they make bigger and fatter profits.
Even at a time when politicians are cutting the incomes of others, an independent report has recommended that the MPs themselves get a pay rise. A simple question asked the public to comment on how they would feel if the elected representatives accepted an increase of thousands of pounds at a time when public sector pay was being cut.
Lots of people in Britain are taking pay cuts, really, because of the government. MPs have been recommended many thousands of pounds pay increase, and they haven't said they'll take it yet. But how do you feel about the idea of them getting an increase when they're imposing a cut?
I don't really agree with it, especially when they had the all expenses issue. I think it would look a lot better for the MPs to turn around and say we don't want this pay cut, we want to give the money back to the people and stuff like that. I think it'd be a good move for them to do, just especially people aren't very happy with the government and stuff at the moment. So I don't think they should get a pay increase, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's a bad idea completely. What with everyone else suffering, they're getting more money. With all the expenses that they get paid, their cars, their flashy houses, you know, people I know are remortgaging, losing their jobs all over the place.
I don't think it's at all appropriate. I think they should look very carefully at what precedent they're setting. It's really as simple as that. They're supposed to be leading us, they're supposed to be telling us what's going on. I think it's appropriate that they should take the same hardship as everyone else.
Lots of people in the public sector are experiencing a decrease in pay. MPs have been recommended to take a many thousands of pounds increase. They haven't said they'll take it yet, but how do you feel about that?
I think it's ridiculous, really, especially after the whole kind of swindle where they're all fiddling, or some are found out to be fiddling with money and stuff like that. I feel there's not a lot of trust with MPs anymore, and I think that would make it worse, to be honest with you.
It's actually quite disgusting, I think. I think lots of people are struggling every day and just dealing with their mess on a daily basis, and I think for them to get a pay rise when they seem to get quite a lot of expenses, and yeah, not great.
On the one hand, I can see that it's a good idea because we need people of high quality, and you don't just want people who can be sort of clever amateurs, so I think that's a great idea. But on the other hand, there seems to be a massive divergence in incomes in this country, which is only getting worse, and I'd much rather see the underprivileged getting more first of all before the MPs get extra.
We asked our experts for a perspective on why this recommendation has been made at this time, and whether the public are right to feel annoyed.
There is a commission that's looked into MPs' pay that is supposed to be independent. What we don't want is the MPs setting their own pay. Now, given that it's an independent review, and that has now recommended that they get the rises, it's difficult to sort of stop them. And we've got to be careful, because if we don't pay our MPs appropriately, then you will not end up with good people entering Parliament. And we can't afford to have good people not entering Parliament. So to some extent, you know, good pay for MPs is necessary, because the cost to the economy of having politicians that are just inherited wealth and things like that is not very good either.
This whole question of MPs getting extra salary of £10,000, it's just unbelievable that the members of parliament can award themselves such high salaries when people in the UK are working on income which is anything between £10,000 and £15,000 a year, whilst the MPs award themselves £10,000. There is something utterly wrong, utterly unethical, utterly immoral in the way that our ruling class wants to award itself with higher salaries, whilst the ordinary people are suffering the pain, the grief of not being actually able to buy the essentials.
All of this leads us to a final, and in some senses, central question in our search for answers about how the public feel in terms of wages. Prime Minister David Cameron has often said that we're all in it together. However, given the suppression of public workers' pay, potential pay rises for politicians, and a multi-million-pound increase in funding for the British royal family, do the public feel we're all in it together, as the Prime Minister claims?
The Prime Minister says that we're all in it together. The millionaire Prime Minister says we're all in it together. Do you feel all in it together with the Prime Minister?
No, I do not. I feel that we're all the Prime Ministers in one circle along with his fellow companions, and we're on our own, comrades sort of thing. We're being controlled by people that aren't living the real world. They have enough more money than they need, and if he cut his wages in half and give him half of his wages till, say, working class people, then I don't think the country would be in this type of dilemma.
I think we're all in something together, but I think, you know, people are sort of different levels up, and I think, you know, he's probably skinny dipping, where some people are up to their neck in it.
David Cameron's obviously a millionaire. But if you were to take someone from the street who's on an average wage, I don't think they're capable of running the country. So I don't think salary wealth has anything to do with who should run the country. Yeah, we are kind of all in it together. So I just think politicians get bad press sometimes unnecessarily.
David Cameron, who's a millionaire, says we're all in it together. How do you feel? Do you feel you're all in it together with them?
I don't think we're all in it together when he's in his, I don't know, his sports car, you know, riding around in his beautiful mansion, going on his holidays. It doesn't seem like we're really in it together there, does it? No, we're definitely not in it together. I think he does put a lot of policies for his own well-being and people in his class. I mean, he targets basically that, and he doesn't really care much about the public sector.
No. I don't believe that that's anything more than spin. It seems cynical to say, but I don't believe in real terms that is what this government stands for.
Well, when Mr. Cameron, if we're all in it together, that means we're all starting from the same starting point and we all have the same head start. When they can give the same education that he has been afforded to everyone else, and everybody is as informed as he and his cronies are, then I think we're all in it together. Why don't you tell him to spend a week down in South London in certain places that are sort of unbearable, and see if we're really all in it together. Then when he puts his money where his mouth is, that's when I'll believe it.
So, a sceptical view from the British public. Do our experts share their scepticism?
We're certainly not all in it together, that's clear. The rich seem to be getting richer. The top 1% seem to be getting richer and richer, while the middle classes are actually getting squeezed because their tax rates are going up, their tax liabilities are going up, and their living standards are getting squeezed by real wage cuts. So the idea that we're all in it together, I think you can forget that one.
It's quite extraordinary when our ruling classes can go and have champagne and caviar, whilst the ordinary people can't even have bread and butter on the table. The children suffer. There is high incident in UK of child deaths and issues of that type, which make it very difficult for ordinary people to survive. So to say that we are all in it together, I think it's again a big lie.
The Treasury has claimed that the economy is on the mend. However, union officials representing the workers claim the government is directly responsible for the fall in wages. The Institute for Fiscal Studies estimates that between 2010 and 2011, 1/3 of workers who did not change jobs suffered frozen or even reduced income, even though the cost of living kept rising. In the European Union, only Greece, Portugal and the Netherlands increased salaries by less than the UK, a sad reflection on Great Britain. After inflation, Britain's wages economy is one of the worst in Europe. So, with a fragile economy, tough economic conditions and a real-term fall in wages, the UK economy is far from the boom days of 10 years ago, and the workforce is bearing the lion's share of the pain. Will that pain turn out to be worth it? That question may seem simple, but it's one that, for now at least, the government simply cannot answer.